What if the moment you stop chasing is the exact moment she starts chasing you? What if your silence, your growth, your peace is the mirror that makes her rethink everything she lost? What if the real power isn't in proving your worth to her, but in living like you never needed her validation at all? She thought she had time. She thought you'd always be there, always calling, always waiting, always proving yourself. But something changed. You stopped showing up to convince her and started showing up for yourself. And that's when it hit her. Not all men wait forever. See, when a woman leaves, it's often because she believes she holds the power. But when she comes back, that's not by accident. It's because something shifted. You stopped chasing. You stopped needing. You started living like your worth didn't depend on her approval. And today we're unpacking that shift. The quiet moment when you pull back, not to punish her, but to protect your peace. In this video, we're diving deep into the psychology behind why the woman you love may leave, but also why she often comes back when you least expected. Not because you begged, but because you became a man who no longer had to. Number 1, the shift she never expected. When you stopped waiting, stopped hoping, stopped chasing, that silence, that calm detachment, it made her question everything. She thought you'd always linger. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. A text here, a like there, some subtle sign that you were still orbiting around her world. But suddenly you weren't. You didn't flinch when she didn't respond. You didn't light up when her name popped up. You weren't cruel. You were just done. That was the shift, and it shook her. You didn't announce your departure, you simply evolved. That's what caught her off guard. She expected you to wrestle with your emotions the way you used to reach out when she pulled away. But this time you didn't. You let her feel your absence, not with bitterness, but with serenity. A Stoic man doesn't abandon his emotions. He masters them. And in that mastery, he becomes unpredictable, calm, steady, free from the chains of needing validation. You see, Marcus, Aurelius said, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And brother, once you changed your judgment, everything else followed. She didn't expect this version of you. The one who didn't need closure, who didn't argue, who didn't explain himself. You found peace in stillness, strength in your silence, and that peace, it echoed louder than anything you could have said. Maybe you hit the gym harder, focused more on your craft. Maybe you just started smiling more and overthinking less. But she noticed they always do, because nothing is louder than the silence of a man who's no longer emotionally available to what once had power over him. This wasn't about being cold. It was about becoming clear. And when clarity replaces chaos, when you stop playing her game, she's left wondering if she ever really knew you at all. Let that be the shift she never saw coming. Not your anger, not your sadness, but your unshakable peace. And now I want to hear from you. What part of this shift hit the hardest? Was it the silence that spoke louder than your words, or the peace that replaced the need for answers? Drop a comment below and let me know what resonated, or just leave this in the comments to let me know you're walking that path now. She expected noise. I gave her clarity. Your journey matters. And trust me, your calm is contagious. Let's keep going. Number 2, you're no longer her emotional safety net. She used to feel secure knowing you'd always be there, emotionally available. But the day you stopped offering that safety without reciprocity was the day she began to panic. Like a Stoic, You stopped investing where it drained your peace. See, in her mind, you were her cushion, her backup, the one who would always pick up, always check in, always care, no matter how distant she became. You might not have realized it then, but every time she pulled away, she was silently counting on your emotional loyalty to stay intact. You were her silent reassurance that no matter how far she wandered, your arms, figuratively or literally, would remain open. But something changed. You stopped reacting. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped giving her that quiet access to your heart when she wasn't giving anything in return. And the moment you did, it created a shift, one she never expected. Suddenly, that emotional safety net disappeared. Not with drama, not with resentment, but with calm clarity. Stoicism teaches that we don't owe anyone our emotional energy, especially when it's taken for granted. As Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That's exactly what you did. You didn't announce you were done. You just moved differently. You preserved your peace. And in doing so, you broke the silent agreement she thought would always benefit her. Now she sits with a discomfort she never anticipated. Not because you yelled or closed a door, but because your emotional presence quietly vanished. And ironically, your absence speaks more now than your words ever did. She's realizing it wasn't just about your attention. It was the emotional stability you once brought to her life, a stability she assumed was permanent. And now you've reclaimed it for yourself, for your growth, for your clarity, not to hurt her, but to heal yourself. That's not cold, it's wise. It's strength with boundaries. And that, my friend, is what self-respect looks like in motion. Number 3, glow up without a show. You improved, but not to prove. You got sharper, calmer, more focused, not for revenge, not for validation. That quiet evolution, it's Stoicism in action. Growth with no announcement, power with no noise. See, she expected a performance, some kind of flashy transformation meant to get her attention. Maybe a cryptic post, a sudden gym obsession, the usual look what you lost routine. But that's not you anymore. You didn't level up to make her regret. You leveled up because your peace demanded it, because there was a version of yourself waiting beyond the pain and you chose to meet him. You weren't loud about it. You weren't seeking applause. You just started moving different. You trained your mind before your body. You mastered your mornings. You took control of your time. Not to be seen, but to see yourself more clearly. And now that silence, that glow up without a show, it's unsettling because it means she's not part of your narrative anymore. You didn't post about moving on. You just moved. You didn't flex your healing, you lived it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's what this is. You stopped talking about change. You became the change. That's why it hits harder. Not because you're trying to be missed, but because you stopped needing to be noticed. That kind of transformation rooted in self-respect, not ego, is the one that lingers. Quiet strength, solid presence. You're no longer trying to be impressive. You've become undeniable. And now you're not chasing closure or clarity. You already gave that to yourself. The glow up wasn't a show for her. It was a return to you. Number 4, absence with presence. You didn't disappear to play a game. You pulled back to protect your peace, and that dignified absence, it lingered longer than any argument. A true Stoic speaks through presence, even in silence. And here's what most people miss. When you step back, not with resentment, not with coldness, but with grounded calm, it creates a space that feels like you're still there. Your absence isn't a void, it's a mirror. It reflects everything they once had in you, and suddenly they feel the weight of what's missing. You didn't yell. You didn't explain yourself in a long text. You just stopped showing up in places where your energy wasn't respected. That kind of pullback doesn't scream, it echoes. It shows up in her late night scrolling, in the silence she thought she wanted, in the way she rewatches your old messages or photos, trying to find a trace of the version of you she once took for granted. That's presence. Even when you're not physically or emotionally available, you're not gone. You're just no longer accessible. And that realization, it cuts deeper than any closure speech. The Stoics taught that the strongest man is not the loudest one, but the one who doesn't need to explain his worth. You knew your value, so you didn't need to beg for clarity. Your stillness said enough. You moved with intention. And in that quiet, you regained something powerful. Your center. See, pulling back wasn't about making her chase. It was about honoring yourself. And strangely, that's often when they start to feel the shift. Not when you react, but when you don't return. You stopped being available. And suddenly your absence started showing up louder than your presence ever did. That's not a tactic. That's transformation. That's Stoicism in motion, where you don't let someone else's confusion disturb your inner clarity. So ask yourself, are you truly gone? Or are you just finally present with yourself? If this resonates, let me know in the comments or just drop this line. My silence speaks more than my words ever did. And before we move on, I want you to sit with that thought for a moment. Have you ever stepped back not to punish, but to protect your peace, and watched how that silence started doing all the talking for you? That shift isn't about ego, it's about evolution. When you stop explaining and start embodying your value, everything changes. So I'd love to hear from you. What part of this hit the hardest? Or if you're keeping it simple, just drop this in the comments. My silence speaks more than my words ever did. Let's keep the conversation going. Number 5. You stopped explaining yourself. No long messages, no emotional clarifications, just distance. When you no longer need to be understood, you've tapped into something powerful. Emotional freedom. A Stoic man lives for alignment, not approval. Think about it. How many times did you explain yourself not because it brought clarity, but because you were afraid of being misunderstood? You wanted her to see your heart, your effort, your intentions. But over time you realized the more you explained, the less you were truly heard. The more you justified, the more it felt like begging for emotional permission. That's not connection, that's a trap. So, you stopped. Not out of coldness, not out of pride, but because you realized that self-respect sometimes speaks loudest in silence. You chose peace over persuasion. Instead of trying to manage her perception, you began managing your inner world. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That shift from explaining to embodying is where your power started to rise. You no longer chase understanding from someone unwilling to truly listen. You lead with quiet action. steady presence, and when there's nothing left to say, you let the silence do its work. And here's what's wild. Once you stopped explaining, once you stopped overgiving your energy to conversations that only drained you, she started to feel it. That void, that absence of validation, that emotional availability she once took for granted. It's no longer there. And that silence, it begins to echo in her mind, louder than any message you could have sent. You're not being mysterious, you're being grounded. You're not ghosting, you're growing. And in doing so, you've reclaimed the one thing no one can argue with, your own inner peace. Number 6, calm killed the chaos. She expected drama. She expected you to react, but instead you became calm, solid, untouchable. She didn't know what to do with your peace. Stoicism isn't the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it, and that mastery, it changed everything. She sent the confusing text. You didn't bite. She pulled away to get a reaction. You leaned back instead of forward. No chasing, no proving, just presence. That calm, collected energy didn't just silence the chaos, it disarmed it. It made her question her own moves. Because when someone's used to pulling emotional strings and suddenly they don't work anymore, it shakes them. See, the old version of you might have spiraled, might have overthought, overexted, overreacted, but now you've got a different kind of strength. You breathe before you speak. You pause before you respond. You reflect before you move. And in that space, in that self-control, you became someone she couldn't manipulate, couldn't read, couldn't shake. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself but to your estimate of it." That shift in mindset is exactly what she didn't see coming. Because calm doesn't just protect your peace. It exposes everything chaotic around it. When you stop matching her intensity and instead meet it with stillness, you stop feeding the fire. You stop playing the role she wrote for you. And the more you stay grounded in your center, the more she starts to spin in hers. Not because you're trying to hurt her, but because you're no longer available to be pulled into her storm. That's the power of calm. That's the lesson of a man who lives by principle, not provocation. You didn't win by overpowering her. You won by mastering yourself. Number 7, you let go without bitterness. She thought you'd resent her, that you'd crumble quietly, but you didn't. You let go, not with anger, but with grace. That shook her more than a breakdown ever could. The Stoic doesn't resist the fall. He rises from it. See, most people expect drama after distance. They expect a storm when they walk away, tears, arguments, or some loud attempt to win them back. But when you showed none of that, when you walked away with your peace intact, it created a silence she wasn't prepared for. You didn't beg. You didn't lash out. You didn't seek closure through chaos. You simply accepted reality, honored your emotions in private, and kept moving forward. That's the kind of response that lingers, not because it's loud, but because it's rooted in strength. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." You didn't mirror the confusion, the emotional games, or the hot and cold affection. You chose clarity. And when you let go without bitterness, you also took away the control she once had over your mood, your day, your sense of worth. That kind of detachment doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop staying where you weren't valued. That subtle shift from emotional reactivity to calm responsibility is what Stoicism looks like in real time. You didn't let the pain define you. You used it to refine you, and now she feels it. That calm after the storm that never came. That version of you that didn't need to be angry to move on. That energy that once circled her, but now it's grounded, centered, unavailable. Letting go with grace isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And it's in that quiet power that she starts to wonder what she really lost. And that's the part she never expected. That peace could be so loud, that your silence could echo louder than any "I miss you" ever could. It's not about punishing her, it's about preserving you. So before we move on, I want you to reflect on this. Have you ever let go of someone not out of hate but out of self-respect? Let me know in the comments what resonated most with you, or just drop this in the comments. Grace over games. I'm reading them all. Let's keep going. Number 8, you became unreachable. Not out of spite, but because you truly moved on. She couldn't reach you emotionally anymore. And that loss of access hit harder than silence. A Stoic doesn't block. He outgrows. See, there's a difference between pretending to be distant and actually being unreachable. You didn't post cryptic quotes. You didn't leave the door half-op hoping she might knock. You didn't play games. You simply grew past the version of you that once needed her validation, her approval, or even her presence. And that shift, it was real. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was internal. It showed in how you stopped overthinking, stopped checking in, stopped hoping. Your peace became the wall she couldn't climb. What unsettled her wasn't the silence. It was the fact that she could feel you emotionally out of reach even if you were just a message away. That's what made it powerful. You weren't cold. You weren't bitter. You were just gone in a way she couldn't trace. There was a time she could say something vague and you'd chase clarity. A time she could withdraw and you'd come closer. But now her silence is met with your calm. Her indirect tests are met with indifference, and not because you're playing hard to get, because you're no longer playing at all. This is what Stoicism looks like in real life. It's not arrogance, it's not emotional shutdown, it's clarity. You saw what drained you and you stopped giving it your energy. You didn't announce your exit. You simply walked toward a better version of yourself. One step at a time, without turning back to see if she noticed. And the irony, the more unreachable you became, not through ego but through evolution, the more she started to feel your absence in places she never expected. In old photos, in quiet moments, in the way no one else reacts like you did. That's when it hits. She didn't lose the man she used to know. She lost access to a man who finally knew his worth. If this resonates, take a breath and remember, true power doesn't come from being desired. It comes from being detached. Number 9, no more emotional leverage. She once relied on your reactions, late replies, tests, silence. But now nothing works. You became immune. Like Epictetus said, it's not things that upset us, but our view of them. And you stopped giving meaning to the bait. There was a time when a delayed message from her could throw off your whole day. When you'd stare at your phone, replaying every word, wondering if you said too much or not enough. Her coldness used to make you anxious. Her hot and cold routine kept you guessing, kept you hooked, but not anymore. Now you've detached from that cycle. You've trained your mind not to chase confusion, not to interpret silence as a loss or rejection. You saw the game and you simply stepped out of it because you realized the truth. Her power wasn't real. It only existed because you gave it weight. You see, when a man evolves, his peace becomes harder to disturb. You stopped interpreting every shift in her energy as a reflection of your worth. You stopped explaining yourself, stopped overthinking, stopped dancing around her moods. You no longer seek clarity from someone who thrives on confusion. That calm indifference, it's not coldness, it's composure. A Stoic knows that freedom begins the moment you no longer need others to behave a certain way in order to feel okay. And that's exactly where you are now. She can pull back, she can test, she can send those vague messages hoping you'll crack. But there's no reaction, just stillness. And here's the twist. That stillness speaks volumes. It makes her uncomfortable in ways your words never could. Because now she's not just wondering if you're still emotionally attached. She's realizing you're not. And that loss of emotional leverage, that's when everything starts to shift. Let her feel that silence, not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that you've grown past the need to be pulled back into emotional chaos. That you're no longer playing her game because you've built a life that no longer needs her applause to be complete. Number 10. Your energy is sacred now. Where you once poured into her, you now pour into your purpose, and that shift in focus, it's magnetic. Stoicism teaches us to guard our energy like treasure because once wasted, it's hard to regain. You stopped giving your peace away just to feel needed. You stopped over-explaining, overthinking, over-giving. That part of you, the one that always checked in, always made time, always overextended, isn't gone. It just evolved. It got smarter, more intentional. You realized your energy isn't for everyone. Especially not for someone who didn't value it when it was freely given. So now instead of chasing connection, you chase clarity. You wake up earlier. You read more. You build your body, your mind, your discipline. Not for a post, not for attention, but because you've chosen to become the man you once distracted yourself from becoming. Think about this. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think is a sign of mastery. That's the level you're approaching now. No longer emotionally tossed around by what she does or doesn't do, no longer leaking your energy through worry, assumptions, or unreciprocated effort. And here's the thing. When a man steps into this space of focused intention, people feel it, especially the ones who used to take that energy for granted. She starts to notice the silence, not because you're playing a game, but because you finally stopped offering your presence where it wasn't respected. You're not colder now. You're clearer. You're not distant, you're discerning. You're not bitter, you're better aligned. That's what happens when you realize your energy is sacred now and you treat it like it is. Let me know in the comments. What area of your life are you starting to reinvest in now that you've stopped over-giving to the wrong places? Or just drop this in the comments. My energy is no longer for rent. And as you sit with that shift, really sit with it, you'll notice something powerful. The more you guard your energy, the more your peace becomes non-negotiable. That's not just growth, that's freedom. It's the kind of transformation that doesn't need to be announced because it speaks through your presence, your discipline, your new priorities. So I want to hear from you. What part of your life are you now pouring into with more focus and intention? Share it in the comments. Or if you felt this message on a deeper level, drop this line below. My energy is no longer for rent. Number 11. She comes back to what she can't control. The irony. When you were available, she wandered. But the moment she realized she couldn't reach you anymore, she felt the void. A Stoic man doesn't seek to be desired. He becomes the desire by being whole without her. You see, control is comforting. When she knew your emotions were easy to stir, your attention always within reach. There was no urgency. She could pull away, test boundaries, and still expect your warmth to remain. But the moment you detached, not with resentment but with clarity, that's when everything changed. She couldn't read you anymore, couldn't predict your next move. And that unpredictability, that quiet confidence, it started echoing in her mind, louder than any of your past words. This isn't about playing games, it's about reclaiming your energy. When you stopped over-explaining yourself, stopped showing up where you were unappreciated, you created space not for her but for yourself. Space to grow, space to reflect, space to regain your peace. That shift, that unavailability, it made her feel what she never expected: powerless. And what does the mind crave when it loses control? It tries to return to what once felt certain, but this time, you're no longer the man waiting at the emotional door. You've evolved quietly, deeply. Now she's the one wondering, replaying moments, questioning how you slipped through her fingers. But the truth is, you didn't slip. You rose. You stopped being a constant. And that absence, it disrupted the comfort she mistook for control. She comes back not because you begged, but because you didn't. Not because you proved anything, but because you didn't need to. And that's what unsettles her. That's what pulls her in. You didn't just walk away. You became unreachable in the most grounded way possible. And sometimes the most powerful shift isn't in who you leave behind, but in who you become after. And there it is. The tough truth isn't about revenge. It's about respect, self-respect. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, the moment you chose peace over proving your worth, something shifted, not just in her, but in you. You stopped showing up for someone who only noticed your presence when it was convenient. You stopped chasing, and in doing so, you became the one who's missed, not the one who misses. That's the lesson. When you stand on truth, when you let go without bitterness and evolve without noise, she feels it. Not because you forced her to, but because you finally gave her space to realize what she lost. That's the power of walking away with grace. That's the strength of a man grounded in discipline, not desperation. So, I want you to reflect on this. What's your tough truth? And are you ready to stand in it? No matter who walks away, drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and I'd love to hear how this message hit you. If this video gave you clarity, helped you reclaim your power, or just reminded you of who you are, make sure to like it and don't forget to watch the recommended videos on screen. Now, they'll take this message even deeper. Thanks for watching, and remember, when you honor yourself, the right people feel it. Stay grounded. Stay rising.